Okay, let's go ahead and get started. First of all, let me thank you all for joining us on this webinar today to talk about the ProLiteracy's Adult Literacy Management and Leadership Training. We've got a good crowd, I think 39 attendees, and as well as the 3 panelists, and a lot of names on there that I recognize and a lot that I don't, so that's good. Before we get started, let's do a little housekeeping. First of all, we're recording this webinar, so on Friday you should get an email with a link to this recording. We will edit out any parts that need to be edited out, load it up on YouTube, and send you the link. We will also be loading it onto Education Network, so those of you who are Education Network users, you can find it there as well. Next, joining me are Sarah Howell and Patty Celadon. Sarah is the manager for this project. Later on, we're going to be talking about how we invited programs to pilot the first 2 courses and how we'll need literacy programs to pilot the next 2 courses that are currently in development. So if anyone has any questions about that process or are interested in becoming one of our pilot programs, Sarah can answer your questions and talk a little bit about that. Patty is actually working on developing our second round of courses, working with our outside authors, and those courses are on human resources and board governance. And so we'll talk about those courses, but if anybody has questions about specific content of those courses, Patty is would be much better able to answer those questions than I would. Okay, and so that brings me to the idea of asking questions during the webinar. If you look at your screen, you should see 2 icons, one that has a Q&A and one for the chat. What we like to do, if you've attended our webinars before, we tend to use the chat function if you are having technical difficulties, if there's no sound or something like that. You can type your problem in there and we'll work on trying to solve that. And then if you have questions about the content, the leadership and management training, type those into the Q&A section, and we'll stop periodically as we go through the webinar, and Patty will be monitoring those and she'll read those off and we'll respond to them throughout the webinar, and then we'll also have plenty of time for questions at the end. Okay, so just a little bit about these courses and who the audience is. Kind of one thing we know about the people who are running literacy programs across the country is that they come into those positions in a variety of ways and with a variety of skill sets. And some of the kind of common ways that they come in is they may have been a staff person for a while. A lot of times they were in charge of instruction or student support or tutor support. They know a lot about instructional delivery, but not a lot about the responsibilities of an executive director, creating a budget for the organization, managing grants and donation cycles, reporting to the board, recruiting board members, hiring and supporting staff, putting policies and procedures in place, those sorts of things. We also have kind of another common experience is someone coming into a literacy program that has worked for a nonprofit, maybe even managed one, but they haven't worked for a literacy organization. So they have general knowledge about that budgeting and administrative stuff, but they don't know like how the staff positions fit together. They don't know the individual pieces of a budget. You know, what's relevant to a literacy organization. What does a literacy organization spend its money on? They don't know the funding streams to go after to get funding for their organizations. And they may be working with a staff and a board that knows a lot more than they do about how the organization functions and how it accomplishes its mission. And then kind of added to that is a lot of times a person with either one of those experiences may come into an organization that is in some kind of crisis. A lot of times they may have had kind of a major funding source cut or have a funding crunch. The executive director who may have been there a long time has left, and they don't have policies and procedures written down. They don't have good budgeting reporting in place. So these courses were designed for, excuse me, went ahead. These courses are really designed for those audiences, especially those kind of new executive directors or people that need really help developing those administrative skills. But these courses are also appropriate for other executive directors and people in a leadership role. So they would be good for folks that you are kind of thinking about grooming and a succession plan. If you're an executive director, or even if you've been an executive director for a while and you've picked up a lot of information, much like our adult learners that we work with, there are always gaps, and these courses are a good way to fill in those gaps. So let's talk about a little bit about the courses. So when we were developing these courses, we surveyed our executive directors to find out what kind of training that they needed. And they identified 5 key areas. We've already developed courses in 2 of those areas, and we're working on developing courses in the other 3. So the first one is financial management. If you think about it, the sound financial management is really what ensures that your literacy program is accountable to your community. It's about complying with federal and state regulations, and it's what ensures that your program will be around for years to come. So under this topic, the courses in this topic will teach you how to develop and manage a budget. They'll teach you some basic accounting principles. They won't turn you into an accountant, but they'll allow you to talk to your accountant and understand what he or she is saying. They give you some good measures to evaluate the financial health of your organization and be able to report on that to your board. They give you some templates for the kinds of financial reports that you should be giving to your board, and then some ideas about how to diversify your funding sources. So that financial management course is available now. The other course that's available now is the one on administrative management. So this is about kind of understanding how to put in place policies and procedures and do those kind of day-to-day administrative tasks. So in this course, and it's just one course for this topic, we talk about the 5 types of strategic planning. We show you how to process for developing policies and procedure manuals and the types of things that go into those policy and procedure manuals and the differences between, like, say, a policy manual and an employee handbook. We talk about processing payroll, the kinds of insurance that you are required to carry and insurance that it's good for you to have. We talk about the Family Medical Leave Act and like what are the requirements for meeting that. Some information on negotiating contracts. That's kind of a basic thing that all executive directors are involved in. Data management and annual reporting and compliance requirements. So those are the 2 topics that are available now. And then I also mentioned that Patty is working on 2 more courses and 2 more topics. One is on human resource management. So if you think about it, your literacy program's greatest strength is the staff that you have on board that's responsible for carrying out your mission. So this human resource management course is really, or collection of courses, is really about helping you make good staffing decisions, recruiting, developing, and recognizing your staff. Again, kind of putting in place policies, manuals, and handbooks, kind of an idea of how to approach compensation and benefits, laws around employment law and compliance, And then lastly, conflict resolution. So how to resolve those conflicts between you and your staff, between staff members, so that you can keep the good people on that you've hired. And then along with that is board governance. So we kind of look at this as that a strong board of directors is kind of vital to the health, stability, and longevity of your literacy program. They provide oversight, they connect you to your community, they secure resources for your organization, and they advance the mission. And so the courses under this topic talk about the types of boards and the stages of development. They talk about the roles and responsibilities of the board members and the executive director, who's responsible for what, how to go about organizing your board so that they can be most effective, organizational planning. So this involves some strategic planning, which is longer range, operational planning, which is kind of within that program year, and then succession planning as well for the board and the executive director, resource development. And so that would include financial resources, human resources, and also community resources, and helping your organization make connections with other community organizations. And then finally, the board's role in oversight of the organization. And those two courses, we're in the process of developing them now. We should have them ready for piloting towards the end of May. We'll run a pilot process over the summer, get feedback, make revisions, and then those two courses will be launched in the fall of 2020. And then our last course that we have kind of scheduled for production is on marketing. It's scheduled to come out fall of next year, 2021. And just kind of looking at marketing as the way that people find out about your organization. It's how you promote your mission. It's kind of the foundation that you lay for recruiting students, volunteers, donors, and community partners. So this series of courses will take you through creating a comprehensive marketing strategy for your organization. So it's not just a collection of flyers and social media posts, but a larger strategy. How to use social media, maintaining your website, how to use Google Analytics to find out who's visiting your website, how they're finding out about you, how to take advantage of both free and paid advertising. And this one is an important one, how to find marketing help. Just a lot of us are not marketers. And so where can we reach out in our community to find those folks that have expertise in marketing and can really help us up our game? And then the last one is creating an annual report. And then a couple of other topics that we are considering, and these really came about through our pilot process of the first two courses, looking at crisis management and change management. So that crisis management piece is recognizing that a lot of times a new executive director comes into a program, and like I said, they're under financial strain or some other kind of crisis has happened with the organization, and that person is new. They come in and they have to kind of immediately manage that crisis and get the organization out on the other side. So some strategies around how to handle that. The other one, change management, is really kind of recognizing that regardless of how you get into that executive director role, if you move up through the organization or you come in from the outside, it's understanding how to manage that change, how to manage the change of your relationship with staff and the board. If you are coming up through the organization, now you're in an administrative or directorial role. That's going to change how you interact with people. It changes your responsibilities. And so how to manage that and foster a good supportive work environment through that change. Or if you're coming in a crisis situation and you need to kind of manage your way through that, maybe you need to transition out some board members, or you're coming in and everybody else kind of knows what's going on but you, and kind of how you get an understanding of how the organization works, and then slowly, bring about some changes and kind of insert your own ideas about the direction of the organization and how to make the organization function better. So next up, I'd like to show you some just some samples, some parts of the courses. Before we do that, though, I'd like to see if there are any questions from anyone. So I'll give like a couple of minutes if anybody has a question to type that in. And Patty, I don't think we've received any questions yet. Is that correct?
That is correct. No questions have been typed.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so while I'm waiting on people to type in questions, if you have them, I am going to escape from my PowerPoint, and I am going to go to my, let's see, this is, and the way.
Todd, we do have a question.
Okay.
From Jerry Byron. I don't know if he wants to ask the question, open the mic.
Okay, let's see, Jerry, see if I can find
Oh,
Jerry.
actually, he would like just to know about a course like this, but in IT.
Oh, good question, Jerry. We don't have any courses like that yet, but we, like I said, the two courses that I just mentioned on crisis management and change management are course ideas that came out of our first pilot. So we would certainly, I think, be willing to add IT to the list and kind of survey our members after we get that fifth marketing course developed, and kind of see what the need is for that, and kind of what are the subtopics that might be involved in that. So if you have specific subtopics that you're would be interested in, you can type those into the chat or the question thing and let us capture them here. That'd be great. Okay, so for those of you who haven't taken our courses before, this is what they look like. There's a menu on the left that kind of shows you what the content of the course is. There is a audio that goes along with it, with the content that's on the screen. I'm not going to play the audio because I'm going to be kind of talking over things, and you may see me click on the screen to, a lot of times elements on the screen will reveal as the audio goes along. So because I want you to see the whole content, I may speed up that. But so this is the first course on administrative management. So just to show you some elements of the kind of content that's in this. So this is why strategic planning is important. So just kind of looking at kind of setting the stage of explaining why the topic's important. And then we go into 5 types of strategic planning. Now this is kind of a typical learning slide for us, where we've identified the 5 types of strategic planning. And then if you click on each one, it kind of explains each one a little bit further. And so issues based, and this one involves a SWOT analysis. Some of you may be familiar with that. And then along this, with the 5 types of strategic planning, you'll see up here in the top, there's a tab for resources. And if I click on this, it's a website for strategic planning for nonprofits. And it's a link to the National Council of Nonprofits. For those of you who don't know about this organization, this is a great resource for a lot of executive director, leadership, administrative type information. But you'll see it has a whole thing about strategic planning, and then links to tools and things like that. So to keep our courses from being overwhelming, when we can find good resources like that, we kind of give you the overview, the background, and then point you to good resources that have just very practical tools for you to use. Okay, next in the policy and procedures manual, I wanted to show you this slide. So we kind of walk you through the process for creating a procedure manual and really creating a process for all the different procedures that you have. So we try to do this for things like creating a budget, writing procedure manuals, so that you have a consistent way to approach it and then can apply it to the different situations that you have. Kind of along with that, we also give you a list of the kind of things that you might find in a policy manual or an employee handbook. And then we also link to our National Quality Standards for Program Management, which has some of those resources for strategic planning, for employee and volunteer management, where you can click on that and like see some actual field-based examples from organizations that went through our accreditation process years ago. So these are actual kind of taking that theory and putting it into practice. We really try to give you examples of that as much as possible. Let's see, FMLA. So we talked about that a little bit. So another thing we try to do is just give you the outlines of, kind of breaking down the actual act and what you need to know. And then we have a thing to, because some states have additional laws and requirements expanding the Family Medical Leave Act. So we try to link you to a website that will let you put in your state. And so I can select Missouri, and then it tells me kind of what the specific requirements are for Missouri, for example. Let's see. Data management options. So here's one that's just kind of going through, kind of recognizing that there are, different ways that programs may keep track of their data. And based on the size of your organization and the budget of your organization, we try to give you a lot of different options, ranging from spreadsheets to multiple data solutions. Let's see, and then the last one, maintaining your nonprofit status. So again, this was kind of an interesting one that came out of the pilot process. If somebody said, what I really needed is when I started my role as executive director, I just needed a list of the things that I needed to file to make sure that we kept our status and were legal. We said, oh, that's a great idea. So that's what this is. This is a list of federal filing and state requirements, and then you'll see kind of we have follow-up slides that outline each of those items a little bit more. So that's the administrative course. Let's move on to the budgeting course. Let's see. So here's the budgeting course. Let's see. Let's talk about that kind of idea about a process again. So you'll see kind of the whole lesson two is on the process, and it walks you through step by step of the budgeting process. There's also a PDF that you can download and kind of keep with you that outlines that same process. This is actually kind of a good resource to share with your board as well, so they might understand the process that you go through. Let's see. So that first step, kind of walking you through gathering all the information, and then we encourage you to create a spreadsheet. And this, I want to show you this resource. If I click on this spreadsheet, it's going to download it, and I'm going to open it up. Give me a minute. So this is an example of the kinds of resources that we try to provide you guys. So we have multiple tabs down here. Let's see, I need to pull this up so I can see the tabs. Where did my tabs go? Excuse me, I lost the tabs for, let's see. Anyway, so this gives you a, I'm sorry about that. This gives you a overview of just kind of a budget template that you can fill in. And if I could find my tabs, you know what? I know. Let's see. Let's see if this one. Yeah, there we go. Okay. So this first tab has a budget spreadsheet that you can fill in. The next tab has that spreadsheet filled in for a make-believe literacy program. The reading is a really good thing, literacy program. So here we have some data that you can actually use in the course, and it has the fiscal year 2017 and the fiscal year 2018 all the way up to month 10. Tab 3 shows you kind of using that information to create a draft budget for fiscal year 2019. That was a budget that might be representative of a smaller program. So we also have the really big urban literacy program budget. So it's a lot bigger budget, has a lot more items. And then we have a blank version of that as well. So if you're a larger organization, there's a template for you to work with. If you're a smaller organization, there's a template for you to work with. And then the last piece of it is, again, some month-by-month data for tracking out expenses and revenue, and then a template of that same thing that you can use with your organization. So again, just trying to provide you with some resources to help you do your job better. So we talk about some kind of budget monitoring processes. So planning for cash flow shortages, for example. So we walk you through kind of how to monitor your budget, being able to predict months where you know that you're going to have a budget shortfall, and give you some strategies. So like developing a cash reserve, talked about how to do that. Let's see, resource diversification. So here we collected some information from our annual member reports about kind of how much funding comes from where. So looking at individual programs, how much of their funding comes from state government, foundations, and corporations. And you'll see kind of, those are kind of for any individual organization, about, you know, those that have that type of funding have about 18 or 19% of their funding comes from that. How many programs get their funding this way. So you'll see this way, like the majority of programs, you know, kind of the biggest share comes from individuals and private donors, followed by foundations and corporate corporations. Those federal government contracts, they can make a big percentage of your budget, but not a lot of organizations have them. So just kind of looking at, you know, being able to kind of look at your own organization's budget and where its funding sources are and compare that to other literacy programs across the country. Here's another stat chart from data from our literacy program. So just looking at kind of the biggest categories of number of funding sources. So 6 funding sources, pretty diversified, but then we also have a lot of programs that have 1 or 2 funding sources as well. So some programs well diversified, but we have a lot of programs that need to work on diversifying the funding. And then board and staff fiscal responsibility. One of the things I think is interesting here is this lesson on creating a financial report. And we try to talk about the information to give to the board, and then we give you a sample of a financial report that you might present to your board. And I'll talk a little bit about this later when we get into what the people that participated in our pilot project had to say. Let's see, and then the last one, the accounting course. So this one, as I said, it's not meant to turn you into an accountant, but it is designed to help you be able to talk to your accountant and understand what they're talking about. So we begin with kind of talking about talking about types of accounting, cash accounting or accrual accounting. And what that means is basically cash accounting means you just kind of keep track of how much cash you have in hand. And that's really the basis of your accounting. Accrual accounting, you keep track of when your organization kind of gets responsibility for that. Like when you sign a contract, even if the payment hasn't been made, to go out, or you have somebody commit to give you resources, even if the money hasn't come in. So accrual versus cash accounting. We talk about 3 types of assets. Those of you who are executive directors or in a position of kind of leading your organization, you probably are familiar with these terms already of unrestricted funds, temporarily restricted, and permanently restricted funds. We talk about what each of these are and why they're important, and why everybody always wants unrestricted funds. These are the ones where, as you might guess by the name, you're allowed to spend them on anything, as opposed to you have to spend them on specific projects. So they're the most flexible, and they are the easiest to use. We go through kind of a discussion of different accounting reports. So the first one is your balance sheet or statement of financial position, and just kind of understanding what that is. And that is really based on assets and liabilities. So we kind of talk about what assets and liabilities and net assets are. We give you some accounting tools to use to be able to figure out the financial health of your organization. So here we have kind of 3 important ratios. So current ratio, it tells you kind of how well your organization can meet short-term financial obligations, and tells you how to calculate it. And then we have an opportunity for you to practice doing that. Quick ratio tells you how quickly you can turn the stuff you have into cash if you needed cash quickly, and it tells you how to calculate it. And then the third one is debt to equity ratio. So this one is really important when your organization might need to get a loan. So it tells you basically how many of your assets are funded by debt as opposed to being kind of owned outright. We look at the income statement. That's another kind of tool and the relationship between the income statement and the balance sheet. We talk about kind of accounting software, and give you some resources where you might go to look for accounting software if you don't have any. We talk about how you might handle the accounting needs of your organization. So if you're a small organization, you might, and don't have a large budget, you might just use an Excel spreadsheet and operate on a cash accounting basis. You might use something like QuickBooks. You might hire an accountant, or you might hire, maybe you have an accountant on your board, or you might hire just an outside service to run the whole thing. So we kind of walk through some of those to help you get good accounting processes and in place and point you towards good resources for you to use. Okay, I think before we go back to the PowerPoint, this is probably another good place to stop and see if anybody has any questions.
Todd, there was a question about if the course content is printable. So I was going to suggest if you can go to the notes tab to see how they will see the notes and if they'll be able to print it from there.
Sure. So on any given slide, there's notes, so you can read these. They're not really printable, but we have a lot of, a lot of the content is on a PDF. So those things are, of course, printable or downloadable. But the other thing about it is that you can access these courses anytime and on any device. So kind of once you've signed up for them and purchased them, you will always have access to them. You can get them, and they're mobile friendly, they're tablet friendly, they're computer friendly. So even without printing them, a lot of the key information is printable in handouts, and then the rest is kind of always easily accessible.
And Todd, we also had in the chat box, we had a question about pricing for the courses, asking if they were free or not. I don't know if you want to talk about that now or if you want to wait until you get to that piece.
Sure, might as well talk about that now. So actually, you know what, let me pull up my slide about that, and that'll probably make it easy. Let me get to that slide. There we go. So they are not free. For programs that are, for anybody that's not a member, it's $150 per topic, not per course. So remember, some topics might have, like the financial management one has 2 courses. I think the human resource one we're doing has 3. So it's $150 for that whole topic and however many courses are in that topic. If you're a ProLiteracy member organization, that price is $45 per topic instead of $150. And Sarah, these are also included in the National Book Fund grant, correct?
Yes, they are. So the National Book Fund grant is open for applications through March 15th, so only a few more days, but they are requestable through that National Book Fund. So if you did not receive a National Book Fund in 2018 or 19, you're eligible to apply and you can request those materials.
Yep, and when you create an Education Network account, you can just go on and pay for these online using a credit card. We use the PayPal website to process the credit card. So you click on the cart, it takes you to PayPal. You can, if you have an account, that's great. You don't have to create one, though. You can still process as a guest. You put your credit card information in, you come right back to our site, and you can get started on the courses right away.
And we have another question, Todd. The question is from David Rawson. Which one of these courses will also address organizational leadership? And which leadership topics would they address?
So those leadership topics are probably, so in the development of the first 5, so I think some, let me kind of back up a little bit. So I think there are some aspects to leadership, those kind of soft skill leadership pieces in the human resource course, where we talk about recruiting staff, supporting staff, recognizing staff. So that falls under that those kind of broader leadership topics. Those kind of the change management and the crisis management will include some of those leadership skills. But then when we asked our field to kind of identify those skills that they needed, they were really more these kind of hard knowledge-based skills. I need to know how to do these, job functions of an executive director. So those kind of softer, broader leadership topics, I think those will be in a second round of surveying and looking at what people would want training in and developing those courses. I hope that answered your question, David. Okay, so just a little bit about the features, why we think these are so effective. You saw a lot of step-by-step instructions. They have real examples. They have valuable resources for you to use, and they point you to additional valuable resources. The content, though it might be complicated, we present it in easy to understand ways. We focus on the things you kind of need to know to get you through the first couple of years in that executive director role and help you feel confident and competent in performing that role. And we give you an opportunity to kind of immediately apply what you're learning to your own organization by walking you through that budgeting process. For example, you can use the data from your organization as you're going through that and creating a budget. I wanted to share with you a little bit of the experiences from our different organizations that went through the piloting process with us. So let me do that. So close some of this. So just kind of some of the people that went through. We worked with 8 newly appointed executive directors. So when we put out the call, we were looking for people that had been in that executive director role for 2 years or less. The piloting took place over the summer, and we asked them to take all of the courses, provide feedback on the courses, and then we really wanted, instead of just getting feedback from the courses, oh, I like this, I didn't like this, we wanted to make sure that the information was actually useful. So we asked people to, based on what they learned in the course, to identify one action that they wanted to do and to actually implement that in their literacy program, and then provide us with a final summary of how that went. So we could really know if we provided them with all the information they needed to get those things done. So here's what a few of them said. So Twin Lakes Literacy Council, this is in this is a smaller program, so 167 students, about 90 volunteers, budget of under $100,000. Let's see, and her project, she wanted to develop a new board orientation manual and a handbook, produce an annual report, and her comment was that the financial management modules were helpful for her. It put things in plain speak and made it easy for her to understand and use. Butte Literacy, now this was a great, I want to keep adjusting. This was a very small program, and 100 students, 17 volunteers, 1 full-time staff person, very small budget. And one of the things that I thought was really interesting in the comments that she had to say about it is she came in and her organization was in kind of a budgetary crisis, and as she said, kind of the books were a mess. They were, there's financial information kind of all over the place, and it didn't really match. So the financial management courses kind of helped her get that stuff in shape. And then most importantly, as she said, it gave her a sense of agency so that she felt like she could get all that financial information straight and then make recommendations to the board and be confident in the recommendations that she was making. Community educational outreach. So they were in kind of good financial health. So she really used a lot of the administrative stuff to put together, um, um, and kind of combine the administrative stuff with the financial management stuff to put together a 3-year plan that focused on kind of recognizing people, having a monthly giving campaign. You see that they currently just had 8 monthly donors when they started. So really looking to kind of grow that and have a steady revenue stream. So it, it really helped her kind of diversify her funding sources and recognize that she had a need to do that. Reed Ottawa, the executive director from Reed Ottawa, she was the only one that came in with experience managing a nonprofit, or with a nonprofit management background, but she didn't have experience in literacy, and this was her first leadership role. And so for her, it was 2 things. It was contextualizing all of that management information in a literacy context, was really helpful for her. And then, as she said, it kind of showed her what she needed to do. So she knew she needed to create a budget, and she knew she needed to report, give a financial report to the board, but she didn't know what should be in that financial report, and she didn't know what should be in that budget. And so having those templates really helped her out. Our last 2, Adult Literacy League, came into an organization in kind of a financial crisis. And so the financial management courses helped her kind of put together financial information in a way that was easy for the board to understand, so that they could understand kind of how they got to that point and what shape they were in, and how they could move forward out of it. And then they used that strategic planning information to re-engage the board in the process of getting stabilized. And then the last one, the Lakeland Literacy Project. So they were, let's see, what were they working on? Oh, so yeah, so they were, the biggest item for her was kind of working on the budget. So that was really helpful for her, having those templates. But also the stuff about the board was, even though it's, we still have the board governance course to come, there was enough information about the board and strategic planning where she realized that she's a small organization within a larger kind of umbrella organization, and that umbrella organization has a board. So she had never really thought about like that I need a board, but through the courses she recognized that the board actually performs a function of providing guidance. They're a resource to help her think through things. They help connect her to community resources. And so she recognized the need for having an advisory board, if not an oversight board, and how valuable that would be. Okay, so just kind of wrapping up. So we talked about the price. Some of the things that people mentioned that went through the pilot, kind of professional credibility, letting others know that they're a competent leader, kind of proof back to the board that you are continuing to develop as an executive director, and just a validation of the professionalization of the organization, especially to volunteers and donors, folks like that. You do get a certificate after completing each topic, and then after we launch these additional 2 courses in the fall, we'll have an overall certificate if you take all of the topics as well. And let's see, piloting. There will be future pilot opportunities. So we'll be looking for, again, for kind of newly appointed executive directors to pilot the next series of topics. So we may adjust that time frame a little bit of being in that executive director role for 2 years. We may expand it a little bit. We try to get people from different areas of the country, rural, urban, big, small. And then I think, Sarah, we will probably just use the sign up for this webinar as an opportunity to reach out to people when we start taking applications, don't you think?
Yes. So The way the applications work is, I'm going to talk about this now, Todd, because I think this is a nice lead into it. So the way the application process works is we have a grant management system. So if you've applied for Mobile Learning Fund, Write Her Future Institute, National Book Fund over the last couple of years, or to be a presenter at ProLiteracy's conference, or even to pilot this leadership training, you're familiar with our grant management system, which is a separate account from your Education Network account. So we'll have an application in there that you can fill out, answer some questions, and provide as much detail as possible. It really helps us when we read these through to make the decision. As Todd mentioned, we'll look for some somewhat newly appointed executive directors, and we will definitely be advertising this, but we have a list of people that have attended workshops that we've presented, and this webinar will pull the emails, and we'll probably send this out a few days before we send it out to our network, so you can kind of get a jump start on applying for it. And like Todd mentioned earlier, we definitely want to try and get some executive directors from larger programs and smaller programs, because we really want to make sure that the courses that we've produced are effective and meaningful for executive directors leading all size literacy programs. And that's something that I think we did a really great job with our first two topics, and we're really confident that we've done it in our next two topics. So the feedback that the pilot programs provide is really instrumental in helping us fine-tune the courses before we launch them to everyone. So be on the lookout for that. I would assume probably mid to late next month we will be sending this information out for a pilot opportunity, with the goal of starting around June 1st or mid-June. So that's coming up very soon.
Yes, and I think we'll also have the same structure. So what we'll do is we'll ask you to take the courses. We will ask you to identify one thing, kind of based on the content in the courses, that you want to do or implement in your organization. We'll ask you to, and like, for example, some of the organizations here, they wanted to do implement a strategic planning process and develop a 3-year plan and things like that. So those obviously take longer than just the summer to pull a team together and get started. So what we ask them to do is really put together a plan, identifying people in the organization that would be involved, the time frame, where they would go for outside support or resources, that sort of thing. So yeah, so it's a more engaged than just taking the courses and reviewing them. We actually ask you to implement the stuff, and then we have regular meetings throughout the summer. I think we had like 3 phone calls, Sarah, is that right? Where we talk to people about their projects and
yeah, so we had an initial phone call with all of the pilots. We had a couple of phone calls with all of the pilots on executive directors on the call at once, so they could kind of bounce things off of one another. And I believe our final call was a one-on-one, so that we could really kind of get into your process, your project, and get your final thoughts in a conversation. So that's how we worked at the initial pilot, and I imagine we'll do the same for this next round.
Yeah, and I see that there are a couple of questions that have come up, good questions here. So one person asked if, just to clarify, if once they signed up, if they would be able to save and download the materials and go back for review and reference as needed. Yes, you will. So, I mean, I don't know that I'll guarantee it through, 2075 or something like that, but yes, for the vast foreseeable future, we will have those courses. Like once you sign up for it, it's connected to your Education Network account. It goes in My Stuff, your transcript, and it'll always be accessible there. And the other thing about it is once you purchase it and you have it, if we make updates to those courses, as long as you have those courses on your transcript, you'll get the updates to the courses as well. For example, if there were changes made to the Family Medical Leave Act or something like that, we might change that content in the course and you would get that update. And then kind of similar to that question, somebody asked, is the program transferable? Meaning, can I log into it at home or from my work computer? Yes, again, it's attached to your Education Network account. You can access ProLiteracy Education Network from work computer, home computer, phone, tablet, Mac, PC. It's all connected to your username and password. And so all you have to do is log on and you can access that content from anywhere. So I hope those answer those two questions, both very, very good questions. And then,
there's also a question about the grant management system. So this is similar to the Education Network account. It's also an online system. So we will provide the link that you can go to, and you'll create an account. It'll just be basic information about you and your organization, and then once you have that account created, you'll be able to log in and see all of the opportunities that ProLiteracy has that you can apply for, and the pilot will be one of those, and you'll click a button to say apply, and you'll fill out an application right in that system. You can save the application. It doesn't need to be filled out all at once. So that's nice. You can take some time to really think about it as you're going through it. And then once you submit, it comes to me, and we send it out, to Todd and Patty and myself for review. And it's a really pretty seamless account. And if you have any questions, my email is on the login page, so you can email me directly. And if we can't solve it through email, we can have a phone call and get you all squared away to apply for the pilot program.
Okay. And so to wrap up, I think I'll give folks an opportunity to, ask additional questions, and just from our standpoint, if there are any topics that you haven't heard us talk about here, and we've already had some good suggestions of IT and those kind of broader leadership qualities. So if there are other topics that you've been looking for more information on as a new executive director or as an executive director, it's been hard to find that information, you can type that into the chat or the Q&A box and let us know. This is your opportunity to kind of shape what we develop next. And then also, what other things, what types of things have you been dealing with as an executive director that you wish you had more training on? So if there are specific things that came up and you didn't know what to do and couldn't find what to do. So we'll give folks a few more minutes to ask those questions or respond to these prompts. And then if we don't get any takers, we will wrap up. Okay. Oh, so here's a good question. Says, is this open only to executive directors, and will there be a limit on the number of executive directors that will be allowed to enroll? So there's no limit, first of all. So it's open to any executive directors. And really, although I said that we, kind of geared it towards new executive director, I think many executive directors who've been in the position for a while would find some useful content. And also, it's not only available to executive directors. Really, it's available to anybody who wants it. We're not limiting who can sign up for the courses, but just trying to let people know who the target audience is. But I think also another audience would be, as I said earlier, if your organization is doing succession planning, if you're an executive director and you're thinking, you know what, I would like to retire in the next say 3 years or so, this would be a good course if you have somebody in your organization that you've picked out to follow you. I think this would be a good place to start, educating that person into what their role would be, and then, kind of bringing them along and training them as you, prepare yourself to leave the organization.
And Todd, to also take this to a different perspective, the piloting is only open to newly appointed, within the first couple of years in their tenure executive directors. And there would be a limit on the number of pilot participants we take, which I believe is in the ballpark of 8 or so. So it is kind of going to be competitive for that pilot opportunity, just in case that's also what they meant.
Yes, good point. Good point.
And Todd, we have one more question as well. These are asynchronous self-paced courses. So that was a question if they were correct. So they are.
Right. They are asynchronous self-paced courses. There are a couple of places. I know I was just reviewing the content last night, and we have some places plugged in where there are discussion boards. So for like the budgeting process, we ask people to go through that process with your own organization's information. And then we ask you to kind of post comments on the discussion board about how that process worked for you, especially if you were doing it the first time, like what did you have trouble with? So there are opportunities, even though it's asynchronous, there are opportunities to go back and look at what people have posted on those discussion boards, kind of over time, go back and see what people's experiences are. But yes, you can take them at 3 in the morning. You're having trouble sleeping and you think, what would help me sleep is if I learned about accounting principles. Okay, let's see. I thought I saw one more question, but I might be wrong. Nope. I think we just have some really good suggestions for content, so that's great. Okay, I think we will wrap up then. Again, thank you all for attending. And as I said, we are recording this, so we will get the recording kind of trimmed up and posted, and then you'll get an email on Friday with a link to the recording. So thank you all, and that's it. Go enjoy the rest of your day.